Okay, before we get started, we're going to inflate the front wheel. This is a standard 700 by 25 wheel. You can see it has, well, it had a plastic thing on it. I took it off. Another plastic protector on this side. I'm going to take it off, throw it away. You don't need it. Looking at the tire, give some basic anatomy. This is the tire. This is the rim. These are the spokes, obviously. This is the spoke nipple right here. And this is the hub. This is a 36 spoke wheel. That's a very strong wheel. Here's the inflation valve stem. I'm going to take the cover off, throw it away. I don't need that. I'm going to take the nut off here. I don't need that either. I'll throw them out. I won't use them. To open the valve, you rotate the end counterclockwise like so until it's at the end. Once it's open like this, you can inflate it or deflate it. To deflate it, all you do is press it like this, and then all the air will come out. So it's a lot better than a car valve. It's a lot a lot easier to work with. Car valve, they do have bikes with car valves, but they're called Schrader valves, but they're hard to inflate because it leaks out. So Presta is better, especially for road bikes. Very few road bikes have Schraders. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check the tire to make sure that there's no tube coming out the sides. I'm going to twist it right and left, back and forth. That red strip under there is the rim strip. That protects the tube from the spokes. If that red strip wasn't there, the tube would pop from the spokes when you blow up the tire. So I'm going to check all the way down the line, checking for tube. So far I don't see any tube, which is good. If I do see any tube, I'm going to shove it back in the tire with my hand, because if you inflate it and tube is showing, it'll come out the side and pop the tube. So carefully go down, all the way down the rim of the tire. I usually start at the valve stem and then I end at the valve stem. That way you know where you left off. I don't see any tube so far. Looks good. Looks good. No tube. Looks good. And now I'm ready to inflate. So I highly recommend a floor pump if you don't have one already. It'll make inflating a lot easier. This floor pump has a gauge on the bottom. Try to get a floor pump that can inflate to at least 130 psi, pounds per square inch. They run maybe 20 bucks or so. Here's the gauge right here. Different pumps connect to tires differently. This one has two sides, one for Schrader and one for Presta. Schrader is the type of valve that your car tire has, and this road bike and most road bikes have Presta, so that's what I'm going to connect it to. This is the Presta valve side, and that's the Schrader valve side. The valve was already open. I twisted it open before, counterclockwise, until it reached the end. Connect it. Different pumps connect differently. This one shoves in, and then it has a lever on the pump tubing right there that I turn down to seal. Now it's on there nice and tight. I don't have to hold it anymore, and I can inflate it. I'm going to keep an eye on the gauge as I inflate it, and I'm going to inflate to 90 psi because the side of the tire tells you the maximum inflation. Always look at the tire, see what the maximum inflation, and always pump to the maximum inflation, because it'll make your bike faster, because the harder the tire, the less rolling resistance you will have during your ride, and it'll make you faster. So generally you don't want to exceed the tire's suggestion for pressure, because then you risk out blowing the tire. I'm going to keep pumping until it's 90. And then with this pump, I just, well, with all pumps, I try to take it off as fast as possible so it doesn't leak. Now it's hard for a press the valve to leak, but I still like to take it off fast just in case. Turn the valve and take it off fast. Then I retighten the valve clockwise this time until it stops, and now it's closed. I don't need to put the rubber cap on, that's unnecessary. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get the quick release skewer that came with the bike. You can see it has 2 springs in it, and the springs, the pointy side of the springs are pointing towards the center. It's very important that you have it on the right direction. If you have the spring in the wrong direction, it's going to get stuck on the tire. It's going to be hard to work with. So here's the screw, the end of it that I'm going to take off, and I'm going to take off one of the springs that's right next to it, and then I'm going to put it inside the tire. Inside the hub of the front wheel. Here you can see the spring. Notice it's facing inward. Now, generally, usually the rim has a sticker on it, and that's how you know which is right and left, because you want the sticker to be on the same side as the rear tire. So the rear tire, for example, the rear tire is, if the sticker's on the right side, then you want the sticker on the right side of the front tire as you put the wheel back on the bike. So the skewer handle should always be on the left side of the bike. So I'm going to take the skewer, which has 1 spring facing the middle, right there. I'm going to put it through the middle of the hub. Remember, this is going to be the left side of the bike when I put the wheel on. Put the other spring and the nut on the other side, other spring with the points facing the center, and screw the nut back on. I'm going to screw it so it's very loose, because I want to make it easy for the easy to put the wheel on the bike. So this wheel's ready to go. It's inflated, and the skewer's on, and it's ready to put on the bike. Here's a tag that I'm just going to rip off. I'll take a knife later and get all of it off so it's nice and neat. And we're ready to go. Okay, here's the bike. I took off most of the paper, the padding. I'm going to leave the paper on the brand name because I don't have the copyright rights to show the brand name, so I won't do so. You can see the rear wheel came attached in the box, so it's pretty much ready to go. I'm going to put the handlebar in, actually the stem. Let me give you some basic anatomy first. This is the top tube, this is the seat tube, this is the down tube, this is the this is the chain stay, this is the seat stay, this is the brake obviously. This is where the seat post is going to insert. Handlebar obviously, stem, brake levers. This rubber part is called the brake hoods. Brake levers with the shifters combined. Another brake obviously. This is the headset. That's the part that makes the fork turn. And this is the fork. So I'm going to put the handlebars into the stem. First make sure the fork is facing forward. And notice that the fork curves forward, okay? You don't want that curving backwards or you screwed up. And it'd be dangerous, and your front wheel will be too close to your frame. It might not even fit. So notice the fork is curved forward. So make sure this might be tangled a little bit. Let's see. No, they're not tangled. Alright, so I'm going to put it, I recommend you put some grease right here on the stem before you insert it. I'm not going to because I don't have any grease. And quite frankly, this is a cheap bike, so I don't care that much. If it was a $2,000 bike, I would go out and buy some grease right now. this part of the stem, this is actually, by the way, this is an old-fashioned stem. It's called a quill stem. Most road bikes these days have a different type of stem for threadless headsets. And if you want to learn how to insert that, just look on YouTube for threadless stem insertion or installation. But this is an old-fashioned stem, and I want to explain why I didn't go in. It has plastic cover on it. Get rid of that. It's garbage. This goes into the bike, into the head tube, and then when you tighten the screw up here, it'll tighten. So let's put that in. Once again, you're supposed to grease it first. If you look on the stem closely, it'll show a line saying maximum or safe height or something like that. But you don't want to install it so this is showing. You want the line to be not showing, because if it's too high, it can break during riding. And on the other hand, if it's all the way down, it might not tighten correctly, because the bottom of the stem will be inside the taper part of the headset, and when you tighten it, it might feel tight when you tighten it, but during the ride it might loosen and you can have a really nasty accident. So just be careful about inserting it too low. So this has a dust cover off. I'm going to take that off, and I'll put that back on when I'm done tightening. This is a 3-sided Allen wrench, which I've had since the 1980s. It served me well as a cyclist, and it has the 3 most popular sizes for Allen wrenches for bicycles. Let's see if it fits. It'd be funny if it didn't. Okay, it doesn't fit. It's too shallow, so I'm going to get a different Allen wrench. Okay, I found another Allen wrench that fits, and I'm going to position the handle. Well, if you're a beginner cyclist, I recommend making the stem as high as possible, because if you're a beginner, you're not used to bending over in the aerodynamic position. So make it as high as possible. That means right where the line is, the safety line on the stem. So where is that line? Okay, the line's right here. It's very hard to see. And I'm going to put it right on the line. Tighten a little snug. Make sure that it's the handlebars is aligned with the forks. And you know what? I'm not going to over tighten right now. I'm just going to make it a little bit snug, because I'm going to make it perfect later. So don't forget to tighten it, or you're going to be in a bad accident. Find that dust cover. I'm not putting it back on because I'm not tightening. Anyway, we're ready to put the wheel on. At the bottom of the fork, there's a protective plastic piece. Take that off, throw it away. It's garbage. Actually, you can save that. You can save that piece for the future, because when you want to transport your bike in your car or something, and you take the wheel off, you can put that piece back on there and protect the fork from being bent. So that's one of the few things I save. As you notice, I like to throw away stuff. Okay, this bike comes with the brake attached, and right here there's a lever that tightens and loosens. When it's tight, the brake pads will be close together. When it's loose, they'll be farther apart. So it has to be untightened for you to put the wheel on. And in fact, it might not even fit right now because I inflated the wheel already. Let's see. Okay, it fits. Okay, I'm going to put the wheel on until it's all the way down on the fork. And then I'm going to hold one side of the hub of the skewer still while I rotate this one clockwise. until it's snug. And then with quick loose skewers, you're gonna push it down until push this lever down until it's tight. Right now it's impossible to do because I made it too tight by hand, so I'm gonna loosen up a little bit until it's the right tightness. It's too loose. I can use the other hand as well to turn clockwise. Okay, and then tighten it against the fork. Obviously you want to make sure it's tight enough, because if it's not, you're going to crash and hurt yourself. Front wheel's on. Now we're ready to make a initial adjustment of the stem. I was lucky enough that this bike came with the handlebar already on the stem. If not, it's very easy to put the handlebar on the stem. Right here there's 2 screws, top and bottom. So just take those off, put the handlebar, make sure it's right, facing the correct direction. Put the screws back on. Remember, don't over tighten it, and when you tighten them, take turns tighten them. You know, tighten some here, tighten some here. You want them to be tightened equally, because if one's tightened more than another, then it's not going to be as stable. So what I'm going to talk about here is the angle of the handlebar. When the bike is upright and facing forward, you want the handlebar to be either this part parallel with the ground, or you want it to be slightly tilted like that. If it's slightly tilted like that, the brake levers will be easier to reach. In the 80s, almost everybody had this part parallel with the ground, but these days it seems to be more leaning back for racers, probably because it's more ergonomic. So I'm going to position this one a little tilted like that, kind of like almost like the pros these days. And once it's positioned the way you want it, and also you want to make sure that it's centered. Actually, I'll move the handlebar for a second. You can see there's, well, it's hard to see, but there's 2 indentations here. I mean, 2 lines. That's where you know what center is. You want it right in the center. Okay, so I'm ready to start tightening. This one's also an Allen wrench fitting. Remember, take turns tightening the top and the bottom so you tighten equally. I'm not going to tighten too much now either. Actually, I can. Yeah, I'm going to, because unlike the stem, I'll know this is perfect. So take turns, make sure it's centered. Make sure it's the handlebar is the angle you want, and then tighten. This one you want nice and tight, because you're going to be putting a lot of weight on the handlebars, and if it's nice and tight, your handlebar is going to slip and get out of adjustment. Okay, so the handlebar is on with the angle that we want. Now I'm going to tighten the stem for good. And I'm going to do it by wrapping my legs around the front wheel and just aligning up the stem with my tires so they're both going in the same exact direction. Once I'm satisfied with the direction, put the Allen key back in the stem. And then tighten. Nice and tight. Not too tight. You don't want to you don't want to strip it. Just tight enough so it's not going anywhere. Then you can find that dust cover that I took off before and put it back on. You know what? If it was me, I'd just leave the dust cover off because I don't care about stuff like that, but put it back on. Okay, so the handlebar is on and the stem's on. Next step, we'll do the seat post and the saddle. Okay, here we have the seat post and the saddle. Saddle is also called the seat, obviously. I actually bought a different saddle because this bike is for my girlfriend. That's a woman's saddle. Women have wider pelvises than men, so they're usually more comfortable on a wider saddle. This one was like 20 bucks online. I took it off her mountain bike, and she was very happy with the saddle. So hopefully this will work well on a road bike. It might not because the position on a road bike is going to be slightly different. But we're going to give it a try. If she doesn't like it, I'll get her a road saddle for women. Alright, looking under the saddle, you can see how the seat post connects. It's just an Allen bolt right there. And I'm going to position this seat a little bit, pretty much as far back as it can go, because that's how it was on our mountain bike. We'll have to do fine-tuning later, but for the initial, I'll put as far as it can go without it going past a diagonal right here. See this diagonal? This part is straight. This is what you can slide on. So I'm going to go right to the end of the straight part without leaving the straight part, and then I'm going to tighten with an Allen wrench. Okay, I'm not going to do this. Is actually going to leave very loose because I'm going to adjust the tilt on the bike. All right, we're ready to put this on the bike. Again, you want to grease it right here. I'm not going to because I don't have any, and this is a cheap bike, so I don't care. Just like the stem, there's a line on it. If you look closely, that tells you the safe maximum height. You want that line to not be showing when you put it in, because if it's too high, it can break during riding, and if your seat post breaks while you're riding, you can imagine that's going to be very painful. So I actually measured her seat height from her mountain bike, and that's what I'm going to replicate right here. So let me do that. It was 67.5 centimeters from the bottom bracket, which is here, to the top of the seat. That's the measurement I got from her mountain bike. So I'm going to measure 67.5 centimeters. And that should be right around here. So I'm going to make it higher. This is also an Allen key for the seat post bolt. Tighten it just enough to keep the, I'm going to tighten it very loose, just enough so I can adjust the seat post without it moving. Notice the tilt. You want the tilt to be flat, parallel with the ground. Most beginners, they make it pointing down. Especially for men, that's not good because it's going to push you towards the front of the bike and you're going to put too much weight on your handlebars. So for men, you want this part of the saddle parallel with the ground. Women, that's a good place to start with too. Women can actually tilt down a little bit towards forward, but the starting point, always start with flat, and then you can adjust as you go. So you can see you can adjust the angle on the seat post, and once you tighten it, it won't move anymore. So let's try to make that parallel. And then I'm going to measure again, look for 67.7. Six, 7.5. Right about there, so this is too high. A little bit lower. 67.5 right there. Okay, I'm going to start with that. We're probably going to adjust it later after she tries the bike on. Now it's the height that I want, but it's still not perfect because it's not totally straight. And by straight I mean this has to be facing straight ahead, obviously. It has to be in the same direction as the top tube. And the way to do that is look down on it with one eye. Close your other eye and then you can adjust it. You're looking at the top tube and the down tube at the same time and the tip of the saddle. They should all be aligned. So pretend the camera is one of your eyes. I want the down tube to be not visual, but right under the top tube. And then right when it's under the top tube, this should be straight. Okay, so once you're confident that this is aligned with this tube, both going in the same direction, then you can tighten the seat post bolt right here with an Allen wrench. Turn that clockwise until it's nice and tight. So you need to make this bolt nice and tight, and you need to make the bolt that's under the seat, under the saddle, this one, you make that nice and tight as well. And then, like I said, as you try on the bike, and you can make adjustments as far as height goes. And it's very important to have the exact right height. And there's videos on YouTube that'll show you how to do that, but most beginners, they have the wrong height, wrong seat height, and it makes for a very inefficient ride. Okay, I'm going to show you how to put on the pedals. The pedals on the right are the pedals that came with the bike. The pedals on the left are clipless pedals. The reason they call them clipless pedals is that in the 80s and before the 80s, the pedals on the right had cages and straps that would secure your foot. So there would be straps and toe clips, and since the clips do not exist anymore, these pedals are called clipless. You actually clip into them. I know it's weird, they're called clipless, but you clip into them like a ski binding. So I'm going to put this pedal on the bike, and usually I would use a pedal wrench like this. But since you're watching this video for how to put a bike together, chances are you don't have one of these. So we're going to try doing it by hand. One thing to know about pedals is that the left pedal and the right pedal, the threads on the pedal are going in different directions. So the right pedal will not fit on the left side. And the reason they have threads in different direction is that when you're riding, you might actually loosen the threads by mistake if they're both going in the same direction. So they're both in different directions to make sure they stay on the bike as you pedal. Alright, once again, you want to put some grease at the end of the pedal, which I'm not going to because I don't have any. And make sure you have the correct pedal to go on the left side. You can actually look at the threads and that'll give you a hint of which way to turn. I'm going to hand tighten as much as possible. And then when it doesn't turn anymore, you know you're at the crank. And though it's not as tight as using a pedal wrench, as long as you tighten it all the way to the end, it's not going to come off when you pedal. So hand tightening is fine. You probably need a wrench to take it off though, when you want to take it off. Okay, so we basically have everything on. Let's review what you need to tighten. This bolt needs to be very tight. These two bolts on the stem need to be very tight. The bolt over here on the seat post bolt needs to be very tight. The bolt under the saddle on the seat post right here, that needs to be very tight. Pedals, make them as tight as you can, preferably with a wrench. If you don't have a wrench, do it as hand tight as possible. As long as it's as tight as you can make it with your hand, it's not going to come off. Make sure the quick release skewers of both wheels are nice and tight. And then you're ready to ride. We're just going to adjust the brakes now. Let's start on the front brake. Again, I was very lucky because this bike arrived with the cable already inside. Well, first of all, the brake was already attached, which is nice, but it's not like it's rocket science to attach. There's a bolt behind the brake, behind the fork, that attaches the brake to the fork. You want to tighten that, but you only want it snug, because you want it, if it's too tight, you won't be able to move it like this. You want to move it right and left, and you're going to have to do that a lot, especially when you're on the road. Like if you change a tire or something, you want to be able to adjust it right and left so it doesn't hit the rim of the wheel. So this has just the right amount of play that allows you to adjust right and left, which is good. I told you about this before. This should be down. That puts the brake pads closer together, closer to the wheel. And then with the front brake, you're going to use the left lever to brake. And what I like to do is like to pull it nice and hard when the bike is new, because the brake cable is going to stretch when it's new. Pull nice and hard a few times, and then make your initial adjustment of the brake. And the way you do that, you take your Allen wrench, you put it in the side right here, loosen it, and then take one of your hands and you're going to push the levers together like so while you pull this cable nice and tight. They have a third hand tool that makes it a lot easier, a tool that will hold this down for you, but I'm assuming you have very few tools, so hold the brake pads together, this side and this side, this side and this side together with your hand. Pull the cable as tight as possible and then tighten it with the Allen key. Nice and tight. Now, squeeze the brake lever again, nice and hard a few times. You're trying to stretch out the cable so it doesn't stretch anymore. Look at the brake levers again. This one's pretty good, it's getting there. It did stretch a little bit, but the brake pads are still too far away from the rim. I want a little bit closer. Actually, you can adjust it. Oh, look at that. right here, the cable housing was not fully seated in the brake. So once I seated it, it actually went out of adjustment again. So, same thing as we did before. I'm going to loosen the cable with an Allen wrench. Use my hand to put the brake pads close together. Pull the cable nice and tight, and then retighten. You're gonna have to do this two or three. You need to do this 2 or 3 times when the bike is new because the cable's still tight. Go back to the brake leather. Pull it nice and hard a few times, stretching out the cable. This is almost acceptable. The brake pads are nice and close to the rim now, which is one. Go ahead and lift the front tire up, spin the wheel, and it should not rub on the brake pads. If it is, then you can just either adjust the brake right and left like I showed you at the beginning, or if that doesn't work, you just loosen it. And sometimes you can adjust it just by turning right here. Sometimes this adjusts the cable tension, but on this cheap bike, oh, it does. Okay, if I turn it counterclockwise, the brake pads will get a little tighter on the rim. So squeezing hard again. Okay, the wheel stopped by itself because the brake pad is touching it now. I'm going to try to adjust it. After I adjust it, I pull on the lever again. That was too much, a little bit to the left. Okay, this wheel's out of true a little bit. I'm going to have to true the wheel a little bit. That's a whole different ball game. Truing wheels, it's more complicated than building a bike. And since it's a little bit out of true, I'm going to adjust it again so the brake pads are farther away from the rim. Adjust it right and left again. And you just keep doing that until you have the brake pads close to the rim but not touching it. And then when you're done, make this nice and tight right here. Do the same thing with the rear brake, and then you're just ready to ride, or you can test the gears first. Best way to test the gears is to put it on a trainer or a work stand that will allow you to turn the gears while you adjust them. If you don't have that, then just have a friend lift the back of the bike up and pedal it while you adjust the gears, and make sure that it is shifting correctly.